In June 1965, 6 teenage boys from a Catholic boarding school in Nuku'alofa, the capital of Tonga, decided they had had enough. Their names were Sione Fatawa, Stephen Fatai Latu, Kolo Fekatoa, David Siola'a, Luke Vekoso, and Mano Totao. The oldest was 16, the youngest was 13. They were students at St. Andrew's Anglican boarding school, a strict institution where discipline was rigid and the food was terrible. Bored and restless, they hatched a plan. They would steal a boat and sail to Fiji, or perhaps even New Zealand, hundreds of miles away across the Pacific. It was an ambitious dream for boys with almost no sailing experience and no real preparation. On the evening they chose to act, they walked down to the harbor and found a 24-foot wooden sailing boat belonging to a local fisherman named Tanyela Uhila. They took it without permission, loaded a few supplies, bananas, coconuts, a small gas burner, some bags of bread, and set sail into the night. None of them had told their families. None of them had left a note. They simply disappeared. The first night at sea, they dropped anchor north of Tongatapu to rest. They fell asleep in the open boat under the stars. While they slept, a squall rolled in. The wind tore the anchor rope free and sent the boat drifting into open water. When the boys woke, they were being battered by waves and gale-force winds. The storm raged for hours. The sail tore. The rudder snapped. Water poured over the sides, and the boys bailed frantically with their hands and whatever containers they could find. By morning, the storm had passed, but they were adrift in the middle of the Pacific, with no way to steer and no way to return. For 8 days, they drifted. They had no food left. The supplies they had brought were gone within the first 2 days. They had no fresh water. Rain came sporadically, and they caught what they could in empty tins, but it was never enough. Some of the boys cried, others prayed. Mano, the oldest at 16, tried to keep their spirits up, but privately he feared they would die at sea. On the 8th day, just after 9 in the morning, one of the boys spotted land. It was a small volcanic island rising from the ocean, steep and dark green. They had no idea where they were. The wind and current carried them closer throughout the day, but it was not until 11 o'clock at night that they reached the shore. The island was Ata, a rocky, uninhabited speck approximately 100 miles south of Tonga. It had been abandoned for over a century. In 1863, Peruvian slave traders had arrived and kidnapped the entire population, taking them to work in South American mines. Since then, the island had been left to the birds, the wind, and the ghosts of the people who once lived there. The boys did not know any of this. What they knew was that they had to get off the boat before it was smashed against the rocks. Mano went first. He jumped into the dark water and swam toward the shore, feeling his way through the surf. The others followed. They dragged themselves onto the beach, exhausted and terrified. The island was steep and volcanic, with cliffs rising sharply from the water. The boys spent the first night huddled on the rocks, cold and wet, unsure of what to do next. In the morning, they began to explore. The coastline offered little: sharp volcanic rock, crashing waves, and no obvious source of fresh water. But when they climbed to the top of the cliffs, they found something unexpected. The interior of the island was a collapsed volcanic crater, a bowl of green vegetation sheltered from the wind. Inside the crater, they found wild taro plants, banana trees, and chickens, descendants of birds left behind by the island's original inhabitants over a century earlier. They also found a rusted machete and a clay pot, relics from the people who had once lived there. It was enough to give them hope. For the first few days, they survived on raw fish caught in tidal pools, coconuts, and bananas. But everything changed when they made fire. Using a technique passed down through Tongan culture, they created a fire plow, rubbing a stick of sea hibiscus wood against a dry plank until friction produced an ember. It took hours of effort, but once they had fire, they never let it go out. They kept it burning continuously for the entire 15 months they were on the island, feeding it with dried grass and wood, rotating shifts to ensure it never died. The fire became their anchor. It cooked their food, kept them warm on cold nights and served as a signal for any passing ships. With fire, they could roast fish and chicken, instead of eating everything raw. Their health improved almost immediately. The boys organized themselves with remarkable discipline. They built a shelter using palm fronds, sticks, and coral slabs, constructing a hut large enough for all 6 of them to sleep under. They established a garden, planting taro and tending the wild banana trees. They caught rainwater and hollowed out tree stumps in the old clay pot they had found. They created a schedule. Each day began and ended with prayer and song. They divided labor into rotating shifts. One pair tended the fire, another maintained the garden, another fished or hunted chickens. When conflicts arose, they instituted a rule. Anyone involved in a disagreement had to separate and cool off for a designated period before rejoining the group. They built a badminton court using vines and driftwood. They constructed a makeshift gymnasium with weights made from stones. They fashioned a guitar from half a coconut shell, a piece of driftwood, and 6 steel wires salvaged from the boat's wreckage. They sang to each other every day. One of the boys, Stephen, fell from a cliff early in their time on the island and broke his leg. Without medical supplies or training, the other boys set the bone as best they could, fashioning a splint from sticks and vines. Stephen could not walk for weeks. The others carried him when necessary and brought him food and water. Slowly, the bone healed. By the time they were rescued, the leg had mended almost perfectly, leaving doctors astonished. Months passed. The boys kept a lookout posted at all times, watching the horizon for ships. Whenever they spotted a vessel, they lit signal fires and waved frantically from the cliffs. 4 ships passed within sight during their time on the island. None of them stopped. From the boats, the island appeared uninhabited, and the smoke from the fire likely looked like natural burning vegetation. Back in Tonga, the boys' families had given up hope. When the stolen boat failed to return, a search was launched, but after weeks with no sign of the boys, they were presumed dead. Funeral services were held. Families mourned. The boys were buried in memory, if not in body. One father spent months searching uninhabited islands, but eventually resigned himself to the loss. On September 11, 1966, an Australian lobster fisherman named Peter Warner was sailing his boat, the Just David, through Tongan waters. Warner was the son of a wealthy industrialist, but he had run away to sea as a teenager, rejecting the business world his father had built. He had become a ship's captain and a competitive sailor, winning the Sydney to Hobart yacht race 3 times in the 1960s. Now he operated a small fishing fleet out of Tasmania, and he was returning home after setting lobster traps near the Tongan Islands. As he sailed past Atta, something caught his attention. Through his binoculars, he saw patches of burned grass on the cliffs. In the tropics, fires do not start spontaneously. Warner decided to investigate. As the Just David approached the island, Warner and his crew saw a figure running down the cliffside toward the water. Then another. Then 4 more. 6 boys, naked with hair down to their shoulders, leapt from the rocks into the ocean and began swimming toward the boat. Warner's crew was alarmed. They loaded their rifles, unsure whether they were being attacked. But one of the boys shouted to them in English. Warner held up his binoculars and studied them more closely. They were thin but muscular, their skin dark from the sun. They did not look like they were dying. They looked healthy. When the first boy, Stephen, reached the boat, he grabbed the side and pulled himself up, water streaming from his long hair. The other 5 followed. They were shouting and crying and laughing all at once. Warner asked them who they were. They said they were students from St. Andrew's School in Nuku'alofa. They had been on the island for over a year. Warner did not believe them at first. He thought it was some kind of trick. To test them, he showed them a photograph he had brought from Tonga, a picture of Queen Salote Tupu III. The boys immediately recognized her. "Yes, that's our queen," they said. Warner radioed to Nuku'alofa on his 2-way radio. "I've got 6 kids here," he told the operator. "They say they're from St. Andrews." There was a long pause. 20 minutes passed. Finally, the operator came back on the radio, his voice shaking. "You found them," he said, crying. "These boys have been given up for dead. Funerals have been held. If it's them, this is a miracle." Warner and his crew gave the boys clothes and fed them. The boys immediately vomited. Their stomachs could not handle European-style food after 15 months of fish, taro, and bananas. Warner sailed them back to Nuku'alofa. When the boat arrived, the entire capital turned out to greet them. Families who had mourned their sons for over a year wept with joy. The boys were paraded through the streets. For 3 days, there were celebrations, one from the families, one from the church, one from the island community. But the celebrations were interrupted. The boys were arrested. Taniela Uhila, the owner of the boat they had stolen, pressed charges. Warner was horrified. He negotiated with Channel 7, an Australian television station, to buy the rights to the boys' story for $150, approximately $203 USD. He used the money to compensate Uhila for the loss of his boat, and Uhila dropped the charges. Warner then took the boys back to Ada with a film crew to recreate their experience. The documentary, titled The Castaways, was broadcast in October 1966 and became a sensation in Australia. After the filming, Warner commissioned a new fishing vessel. He named it the Ada. He hired all 6 boys as crew members. They worked for him for years, earning a living and learning the trade of commercial fishing. Warner moved his family to Tonga in 1968 and lived there for the next 30 years, building a fishing and shipping business with the boys as his trusted employees. He was granted a royal concession by King Taufa Ahau Tupu IV to fish for Pacific spiny lobster in Tongan waters as a reward for rescuing the boys. Warner and Mano, the oldest of the 6, became especially close. Even decades later, after both had moved to Australia, they remained friends and sailed together regularly. In 2015, 50 years after the boys' ordeal, Spanish explorer Alvaro Cerezo traveled to Ada with Kolo, one of the original 6, who was then in his mid-60s. They spent 10 days on the island, surviving exactly as the boys had in 1965, eating coconuts, fish, and seabirds, sleeping in a shelter made from palm fronds, and keeping a fire burning. Cerezo later released a documentary and a book detailing the experience. The story of the 6 Tongan boys resurfaced in 2020 when Dutch historian Rutger Bregman featured it prominently in his book Humankind, A Hopeful History. Bregman used the story as a direct rebuttal to William Golding's novel Lord of the Flies, which depicts British schoolboys descending into savagery when stranded on an island. The real-life experience of the Tongan boys, Bregman argued, proved the opposite. When faced with isolation and hardship, the boys did not turn on each other. They cooperated. They created rules. They cared for the injured. They sang together, prayed together, and refused to give up on each other. Golding's novel has been taught in schools for generations as a commentary on human nature, a warning that civilization is a thin veneer and that people, especially children, will revert to brutality when stripped of societal structures. But the Tongan boys showed something different. They showed that humans, even young humans, are capable of extraordinary cooperation, empathy, and resilience when survival depends on it. Film studio New Regency acquired the rights to the boys' story in 2020 for a possible feature film. In 2024, Finnish metal band Nightwish released a song titled The Children of Ada on their album Yesterwind, using the boys' story as a metaphor for humanity's capacity for hope and unity. Peter Warner died on April 13, 2021, at the age of 90. He drowned when his boat capsized while attempting to cross the Ballina Bar at the mouth of the Richmond River in New South Wales. He was still sailing, still seeking adventure, still refusing to live a conventional life. Tributes poured in from around the world. His daughter called him a great seafarer who died doing what he loved. The Cruising Yacht Club of Australia mourned the loss of an exceptional sailor, and the people of Tonga remembered him as the man who had given 6 boys their lives back. The 6 boys from Ata did not set out to prove anything about human nature. They set out to escape boredom and see the world beyond their small island. A storm wrecked their boat and left them stranded on a volcanic rock in the middle of the Pacific. What they did next, building a society, caring for each other, refusing to descend into chaos, was not exceptional because It defied expectations. It was exceptional because it revealed something fundamental about what humans are capable of when they choose cooperation over conflict. For 15 months, 6 teenagers survived on an uninhabited island without adult supervision, without modern tools, and without any certainty that they would ever be found. They did not fight, they did not fracture, they built a life. And when rescue finally came, they were healthy, strong, and still singing. That is the real Lord of the Flies.